Well, good afternoon everybody and welcome to this public oral evidence session from the Public Accounts Committee. My name is Lewin, I'm the chairman of the committee, and I'm joined today by committee members Tanya August-Phillips MLC, Rob Mercer MLC, Jason Morehouse MHK, Anne Corwett MHK, the Auditor General Stephen Warren, and our clerk Erin Duncan. We're here to talk about the Efficiencies and Change project, and if I could ask the panel please if they would introduce themselves along with their job titles. Thank you.
Alf Cannan, Chief Minister.
Megan,
Mark Lewin, Chief Executive.
Megan Mathias, Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you very much. So, Chief Minister, if you'd like to make your brief opening remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to discuss the Efficiency and Change programme. As you know, we set up an Operations Performance and Change Board earlier in this administration, and from that board we've appointed non-executive directors. In September 2024 I announced that I wanted a £10 million efficiency a programme set up, an efficiencies programme to find at least £10 million a year in savings or efficiencies for government departments. In effect, because of a couple of changes at the top, that really didn't get underway until April 2025, but it is underway and I'm pleased to be able to come and talk about it this afternoon.
Thank you very much. This is an area that you're not without experience in, because back in 2017, Treasury, when you were the Minister, launched the SAVE programme, which looked to deliver savings from about 1,300 publicly submitted ideas with a view to saving £25 million a year by 2021. By that measure, it appears to have been a bit of a failure. There appeared to be very few savings realised. Perhaps you could give us your reflections on the SAVE process and how that worked as a backdrop for this particular programme.
Yeah, I think they were significantly different. Fundamentally, it was an ambitious savings target set out by a Treasury board in 2017, I think, and fundamentally that looked not just at efficiencies, but fundamentally did look, I think, from the programmes that came forward in service redesign. This is not about fundamentally changing services in the way that you would be expecting to pick and choose. This is about supporting departments in the efficiency of delivering those services, and also, I hope, ensuring that we can design those services that they are already delivering in such a way that they are more beneficial and accessible to the public. So I think, although there were some similarities in terms of the start of the SAVE programme and the efficiencies programme, we've done this perhaps in a more nuanced way. We have not set out, I think, to redesign departments or redesign service delivery. We've designed this to provide the support that departments need to deliver their services more efficiently and effectively.
So in terms of best practice, has there ever been a formal review of the SAVE programme?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So,
if I could perhaps just add, is part of where this project kind of first came, and we got a number of people around the table. This is very much creating ideas, suggestions, frustrations that come from inside the organisation, and that's the starting point. But as part of that process, we did also go through the SAVE and look through the 1,300, look through the Tynwald reports, look through the kind of the major projects that were called out as part of that, just to understand where they were up to. So they are absolutely different. They come from different places, but we did go back to that just to refresh and check whether any of it was still relevant in the context of how we deliver the services today.
Okay, so in terms of the overall lessons that you think were learned from that project first time round, how would you characterise the lessons learned that have informed this process?
I think, first of all, the level of ambition perhaps has been tempered. Don't go to Tynwald to ask them to support savings measures. Try and, I think if you can deliver them within the departments and help and support the departments come to those decisions rather than try and impose those, I think that is probably a better way to get these efficiencies delivered. But yeah, as I said, Mr. Chairman, I think it's fundamentally different to the SAVE programme in many of those respects, and You know, I think this will be I hope this will be a long-term legacy, serious programme, rather than a short-term administrative programme, because it ultimately emanates from what I hope will also be a long-term serious board that we've created in the Operations Performance and Change Board, and the way that board has the capacity, I think, to work with senior executives across government to more effectively understand where and how they can more efficiently and effectively deliver services.
So I was just about to hand over to Mr Morehouse, but you've described the SAVE programme as both an ambitious restructuring of government and as a short-term administrative programme. Surely they can't both be right.
Well, no, but one finished at the end of the administration. Yeah. I'm hoping that this one will continue now, beyond that, and into the next administration, and possibly beyond that, because I think fundamentally, we have created at the centre, I think, the capabilities to deliver much more coordinated cross-departmental savings, created a board that can assist and challenge the senior executive led by the chief executive officer, but more importantly, coalesce and bring those different groups together. And we further enhanced that actually this morning by reintegrating the Treasury into the Operations Performance and Change Board, and vis-a-vis giving them more sight, I think, on the efficiencies programme, and perhaps linking that more to their own savings programmes that they are trying to deliver in their own way.
And if I could just perhaps add one more element in terms of the SAVE, again from our reflections and looking at a lot of the major things that came out of that towards the end were around structural change, delivering services in a different way in terms of physicality, whether that's the airport, the transport, buses, whether that's quarries. What this programme predominantly is about, looking at how we do things and making that process, that way of dealing with either the public or dealing with ourselves better. It's less around structural change, which perhaps is where sometimes it does become more difficult, particularly as you change through an administration.
You want to follow up?
Just on that score, isn't there not a risk of automating existing inefficiencies in those services with this approach?
Absolutely. What a great question. And we've got a number of example projects, and I no doubt we'll touch upon these, but one of the first things we do is absolutely step back and say, why do we do that? Not even why do we do it in that way, but why do we do it? Is there a way? And going back, part of the resources we've been bringing in, so part of this has been about mobilising existing resources, more focus around it, more clarity, more transparency. Partly we have brought some additional resource, that includes in the services stream as an example, who will sense check, who will step back, who will look at why we're doing that. Often we hear, well, we do that because that's the way it's laid out in law, or that's the way it's particularly prescribed. One of the things we do is we test that and see, A, is that right, and B, if there is in today's world a need to change that, then let's not be afraid to change it.
Well, let's have a little look in the current programme and what that's planned to look like. And Mr Morehouse.
Thank you. How would you find the risk appetite? Less than 5 minutes ago, the Chief Minister said that levels of ambition have been tempered. So in terms of risk appetite, what level are we going for?
Well, as far as I understand, actually, there's been hugely positive engagement throughout government in terms of bringing forward opportunities for service improvement across the pillars that we've identified: digital, contracts, assets, people, and services. I think, from my view, there has been quite an emphasis on digital. That's probably the easiest area in terms of the abilities for government to deliver quite quick improvements. Prioritising those and bringing those together has been a key part of what we needed to do, and across the other areas, perhaps more complexity, but nevertheless those are areas that will also potentially deliver strong savings into the future on the contracts, assets, people, and services. But Mark, do you want to?
I think again, when we started out, we've spoke to staff. We've had a number of conversations with the unions. We clearly speak to members of the public as well as part of various different services. There is really a real strong appetite for change in lots of different areas, but everything we do has to be tempered with a bit of balance. So When we talk about digitisation, we do recognise as a public service we have to be fully inclusive and recognise a diverse society. There is a balance in that. When we talk about, and we'll get onto it no doubt, in terms of people and staff and planning for the future, there is a balance in terms of roles that will change. They have been changing for 10, 20, 30 years, but they are perhaps going to change at a pace which we've not seen before. In the contract stream, we've had conversations around renegotiating, repositioning existing contracts. In a private sector organisation, that's something that perhaps would happen. In a public sense, public sector sense, there are some real measures and balances in terms of the risks that need to be taken into consideration. So there is a real enthusiasm, there is lots of things happening, but I would say for lots of them we're also trying to find that right balance for the things that we do to just strike the right chord.
And can I just add one point to that, because it's really important, I think, to get this absolutely clear, because I think there has been some misunderstanding. This programme is about how we deliver services, not what we deliver. You know, we are not trying to challenge departments in what services they are delivering. We are simply looking to help them deliver their services, i.e. how they deliver those services, and creating greater efficiencies in that services. The savings targets, if you like, are already, in terms of the Treasury and the budget, are already impinged in terms, or have been in terms of what the budget has been voting through. So, for example, last year there was approximately £5 million of non-pay savings and £3 million of pay savings required by the Treasury. So there was already £8 million for all departments to find in terms of savings. This programme is designed to help them find that money, but also deliver those services more efficiently. We are not challenging what services they are delivering.
But in terms of risk, was there that emphasis on encouraging the departments to take a risk and to move forward? Because in terms of when you look at the list, you've got probably about 50 items, and over 27 of them are actually digital. And just in terms of natural progress, isn't digital the thing that's going to come on next? In terms of, if you ask the department what you're going to do, it's going to be moving towards digital. Were there any actual new ideas, things that had never been considered before? Or was it just a case of continuity?
I think you know, delivering services faster, quicker, more efficiently is, and coordinating that and helping prioritise that by bringing it together into a central efficiency programme, I think has helped government overall try and identify where those critical areas lie, what we should be focusing on, bringing a more coordinated approach. In terms of magic new ideas that have been coming forward, I mean, I do think they have been coming forward, but Megan?
I can perhaps give two examples that give flavour to that. One is the Digital Processing Centre, which is very much about taking those processes that are or could be standardised across government and delivering them in one place. So, if you like, an insourcing solution to bring that into a central place. So grants management would be a great example. There are lots of different departments that deliver grants. They would still absolutely own have the legal ownership of that, set the criteria for it, but that could be both administered and digitally delivered centrally. So what we're doing with the Digital Processing Centre is spending time at this point, and it is taken longer than we'd hoped on that one, but to design and think that through, because to your point, Mr. Morehouse, when you do bigger bigger changes like that, there are risks involved that we'd need to consider, and you touch upon one in your questions later about, for example, data management. Should we go down that route? The other one, I would say, is about getting more ambitious about AI enablement, and I'd be happy to go into that. When you first asked the question about risk, I'd actually heard it about encouraging staff to engage and suggest ideas and actually work in their own departments to be part of the change and deliver spotting things they can think they could do better with a little bit of help themselves. And that's very much part of what we're trying to do, to get that confidence up so that people try and are comfortable to try, and perhaps even we can accept some failure in that. A great example of that is the Power Apps Academy that has just launched. That's part of our AI enablement approach, and I can go into the full detail should you like. We've got a cohort of 24 from 7 different departments on that at the moment. That's essentially the more technically savvy selection coming through, being trained up in developing AI agents themselves. So once they've graduated, if you like, from this academy, they will be able to develop agents that they can then deploy within their own services across government. We're proposing to start with that those agents will be used on internal processes only, so we're doing it in a safe way, and that they will be accredited and assured by GTS. So we're trying to ensure that not only are we building up capacity in the centre to support this, but we're supporting departments to be able to drive change themselves as well. That is very much at the start, though. I won't overclaim for that. It's going to be really exciting to watch.
In terms of identifying possible projects, what approach was taken in terms of the previous answer? It was that all-inclusive concept that you kind of suggest. Was it all-inclusive? Was it key people from the department? How do these things evolve?
I can certainly start, and Megan can add to, and she's having a live round at the moment, going back around departments with chief officers. But we go back a year and a bit when the challenge was set. There was a process of getting a number of people, senior leaders around the table, familiar with the relevant areas. That might be procurement, assets, the digital teams, etc. And just trying to get together what we were either already doing that needed eyes on, or what we knew that was out there by way of suggestions, ideas, desires. And that was all brought together by way of the original list. We then had a process, and we went through, and I sat through with the team with dialogue with each chief officer to enrich that, look at again what their needs were, what they thought we should be doing, what the list should look like. And that process then went down to, we opened staff suggestion scheme in about, April last year. We've had 140 of those. They've all been triaged, shared with the departments. Some of them are absolutely relevant in the context of the things we wanted to look at, wanted to know about, people's frustrations. A good proportion of them are actually already flagged. We already have a piece of work in that space to do. Perhaps sometimes communication isn't, it's not clear that we are doing that, or we've talked about it for a while and people kind of don't necessarily know where that's up to. So certainly we started at the top, we gathered in, we then checked through chief officers. We've done it at COG as well. We've brought staff ideas up, but there have also been, again, Megan, you've been doing some stuff recently.
Sure, and that is to, in a sense, we had that first wave of the projects that you can see on the list that came through that kind of centrally coordinated process. As we, to Chief's point, try to mature this into an ongoing, sustainable, continuous improvement approach, if you like. What we're doing is meeting with chief officer and senior team, having conversation about what are your change priorities, whether they're efficiencies or not, to understand the picture from the departmental perspective, and then match that against the resources we can put to it, the resources they can put to it, and come up with something that's genuinely aligned and fully aligned to each department's objectives. We're then shifting that initial call out to all staff that has fed in, but going forward, most of those, we'll keep the staff suggestion scheme open, but we're finding that a lot better quality and richer engagement comes when you're doing it within departments, within services, because it's a more manageable scope, if you like. So it'll go forward, if you like, in that way.
I can just add there were another couple of iterations of that, where the project team went out and met with the Treasury business partners and the senior leadership teams in the departments, the Sench Tech as well. And also at one point, Minister Krukal went out and ministerial had one-to-ones as well to look through the list of what the ministers felt in their departments should be on the lists. So we have had it from a wide range of sources.
And in terms of the £10 million annual target, where did the figure come from? It's only a fraction of the annual spend. Is it enough? Because it's not going to scratch the surface of the structural deficit.
It's not.
Not going to scratch the surface.
I need to be clear. I mean, I have never set out to solve the structural deficit. With this is an efficiency programme. This is driven by me and centrally through the Operations Performance and Change Board. It is designed to enhance the oversight of delivery of government services to drive efficiencies. It is to put in place longer term oversight and bring disparate departments together to deliver better services for the public through enabling and assisting them change how those services are delivered for the better. This is not the Treasury. I am not delivering a change programme to change the structural deficit. That is very much a budgetary matter. The Treasury have set out their own long-term or medium-term financial plan to deal with the structural deficit. This is an efficiencies programme designed to improve services, save money, but the departments are already challenged by the Treasury themselves through the budget to save money. And where did that 10 million figure came from? Well, you know, you have to start somewhere. As it happens, you know, pay and non-pay savings appeared to amount to around £8 million from last year from the Treasury, and actually this is what I would call a much better, efficient, effective way of trying to bring efficiency, better service delivery, both to the departments and to the public through a coordinated approach. It's bringing more accountability to what's going on in terms of efficiencies, although ultimately it's the management accounts of the departments that will reflect the savings that are brought about and how the departments then deal with that saving and how they then tend to, will then tend to sort of reorganise themselves in terms of further service delivery.
Where did the £10 million aim come from in terms of a figure? And also you spoke there a lot about service improving or implying service will be improving. How will that actually be tested and checked? There is a stringent process going on, and I'll get Megan and Mark to talk about that in terms of identifying the value from what is being delivered. But we're already starting to see value from better digitalisation of programmes. Vehicle licensing, I think, is one that I would obviously point to as a programme that is clearly, I think, delivering benefits for the public. In terms of that digital access, there is work ongoing in terms of the front door to government, the main website, and other programmes which you've got details of, which will enable digitalisation. If you enable digitalisation, in theory, you create more opportunity for reallocation of staff, or indeed for determination as to whether, in fact, you can change those staffing levels in the longer term. So fundamentally, that's the detail. But can you just add, Mark, that sort of resonance and how you're verifying the saving and how you're working with departments to reach that point?
Just before I do the kind of validation, the original number when I guess the challenge, the gauntlet was laid down September 2024, it's roughly, I say roughly, 2% of pay and non-pay for areas excluding health and care. And that felt, just in terms of a top-down, and as the Chief said, the departments are already under pressures around that level, so having an understanding of that's the broad set of parameters. But we also, when we came from the bottom up, looked at the kind of topics that we thought there were opportunities, from digital to assets to contracts. When you look at each of those, trying to allocate what we thought might be a reasonable amount to start with, then 10 certainly was a starting point. And as the Chief said, we have to start somewhere, and much of that, in fact much of the stuff we're seeing already, is on a recurring basis. So we talk about single numbers at the moment. When you see the quarterly reports, it references a figure of identified. That is not recurring. That's the kind of the one-off value of it. In terms of the validation of stuff, it goes through a process where The ideas are logged initially. We then go through a process that involves the departments and the finance business partners to understand, is that real? Can it be agreed? Is that something we can physically move to the kind of the work category? Do we need resources? Have we got a business case, etc.? And then fundamentally the stuff that we fully realise gets noted through the management accounts, which again goes through a process which clearly includes the department and treasury. So, we are 9 months into that process. We are still early days. We're still enriching that with colleagues, including treasury and the departments, but that's very much the process we're on.
And can I just go back to that point? I mean, should Tynwald stroke the treasury present new plans to tackle a deficit and demand further savings from departments or a new way to do things, and present greater challenges to everybody in terms of finding savings, then I think the body of work and the Operations Performance and Change Board will certainly be an enabler to help deliver that. I think the structure that we have put in place, as I said, is new. It is working. We are getting good coordination with departments. We are tracking now to deliver savings. We can see those coming forward, maybe not quite at the pace that we want, but should that challenge be put forward to change the structural deficit at a faster pace rather than the medium-term financial plan, absolutely, Mr. Morehouse, sir, this would act as an enabler, I think, to help in that process. And just a final point from me on that. Look, there is potentially quite significant savings to be found, but there is also a lot of work, and we are bringing together, obviously, the property side, which you know about, the proposal to put that into one statutory board, and I guess, in terms of the staff, that staff side in terms of finding savings through contracts and realigning skills and how people are being deployed is clearly quite a big project. It involves quite a lot of work and involves obviously staff engagement. But yes, and even in the contracts side, the government contracts runs into £150 million or so, excluding Manx Care. You should in fact be able to find savings, £5 to £10 million, maybe more, £15 million from that with a close examination, and that sort of work is underway, but as yet it's all unrealised and all theoretical.
It's all been positive so far. 9 months in, there must have been challenges, there must have been kickback, there must have been potential conflicts of interest. If you're asking in-house officers to take forward something that's going to have an impact on headcount, on various other aspects of their daily work and what's happening around them, there's going to be some kickback. What kickback have you actually seen, and have any concerns been raised about the way things are moving forward?
Look, so I mean, I think there's always anxiety, isn't there, from staff potentially when you start on these efficiencies programme, but we have tried to engage positively with everybody. I think there has been positive engagement actually, and this has never been about us, this particular piece of work, determining that there should be headcount changes, but this is about enabling departments to make better decisions about workforce management. So we're not predicating or going out from our perspective. We are enabling these savings, we're enabling these deficiencies. I hope that will give chief officers and ministers more opportunity to determine how they can run their departments more efficiently and effectively. And of course the bottom line, and which we're all concerned of in terms of the budget, will of course be driven by Treasury. They have, of course, I should point out now, are embarking on their own project around priority-based budgeting. That's why I wanted to say today, realigning now with Treasury and having the Treasury Minister rejoining the Operations Performance and Change Board, I think will bring us into more closer alignment, and I hope that recognition may result in perhaps more further determinations once the results of the project-based budgeting are brought forward and also recognised.
Yeah.
So if I may speak to the linked, slightly wider point of people being nervous about the advent of AI and what it means for roles. We have picked up both, as the Chief quite rightly says, a lot of excitement about it, and we did a particular pilot in Cabinet Office that very much drew that out and showed that actually using the AI tools in reduced mental load and reduced stress because people felt they were being increasingly productive. So there's some really positive messages I would want to get out about it. But no doubt there is a generalised concern about AI. One of the things that we are looking at is to, alongside our AI enablement project, is to increase support for wider digital tool training, recognising that we've got a wide range of levels of skills and abilities across the public service, and we want to make sure that people aren't left behind. So I'm very conscious that we are investing in increasing training for use of AI tools, particularly Copilot, within our firewall, but that we need to make sure that those people who might be nervous about that can also pick up the basic skills of using the Microsoft package itself before you even get into Copilot. So it's not a complete answer, but we are recognising some of that and seeking to respond to it.
And my final question is linking back to that less emphasis on wider staff engagement, which you mentioned previously, tying with the answer you've just given about staff concerns. Is it possible that the two things go together and the staff are worried about bringing ideas forward because of the impact on them? And if you actually look back at Asda in the 1990s, one of the greatest turnaround stories, that was wholly done on staff ideas and staff thoughts that really transform the company.
So I mean, we've just signed off this morning on or acknowledged that a staff engagement survey will take place very soon. It'll be the first one for a number of years, 4 years. And I think that's also a platform that we're going. I think the officers are going to use to gauge some of the thoughts of staff at the present time, and will act clearly as also an indicator of perhaps how we might carry forward some of the planned projects.
Could I just exactly that the staff survey will pick up that wider cross-government staff engagement, and what we're proposing is once every 2 years, whole of government. Excluding Manx Care because they already have a very well-developed, sophisticated engagement mechanisms. And then the department services can do pulse surveys in between. I just wanted to clarify, Mr Morehouse, I didn't mean stopping wider staff engagement. What we were concerned about is that the feedback loop from member staff into a central programme and back then through their departments can take too long at times, and that is disengaging itself. So what we'd like to do, it's even digitalised, what we're trying to do is make sure that engagement is more immediate on the projects that are going ahead.
And if I could just add, one of the first things we did back again in April was improve our ability in terms of communicating this to staff. So we created a SharePoint site for it. We've had monthly updates in there. We've done videos, we've done stories. We're trying to kind of get the message out. Actually, across all the themes, most of the stuff that we've had brought to us is brought with real enthusiasm. Frustration, some of the stuff that we've talked about for a long time, and it hasn't necessarily got over the line for whatever reason. Can you put a bit of focus? Can you put a bit of resource around it? Can we get it over the line? But equally, I said before, in terms of kind of looking to the future, we are alive that roles will change. They are changing. A good example, and Megan talked about AI, but Chief Officer Group. So for now, all of the minutes are formulated by teams automatically and then checked. Doesn't mean we've displaced somebody's role. What we have done is freed them up from part of their role that used to take a long time. Didn't particularly give them the sense of purpose. So roles are changing. We have to be alive to that. And clearly, that pace of change is only increasing. But we are trying to find the balance by, say, most of the stuff that's coming up so far is actually coming up from a really positive place in terms of a desire from people to either dispose of things we don't need anymore, or recontract with something that no longer fits, or reimagine a process that's been there for a long time that clearly everyone says can be done better.
Thank you. Mrs August Phillips.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, just from this section of the discussion on the current programme. The first one is sort of around AI enablement. We've talked quite a bit about the benefits of it. There's also sort of a risk that sort of sits there as well. And I wondered whether or not you're applying a risk management approach to the rollout of AI across the public sector.
No, yes, I was just trying to, apologies, thinking how to answer. We're taking a risk approach across the whole programme, of which it is one of the areas. So not dedicated to that. So as you'd expect with any project rollout, is there something specific that you wanted me to speak
More
to?
just sort of like, any unintended consequences that might come from making use of any of that type of technology, that's all, from AI.
So firstly, there are all the risks of that we understand about AI tools, even though they're evolving quickly, about the risk of hallucinations.
Yes.
And the risks of it displacing thinking, frankly. So we have developed, for example, and I'd be happy to share it, that I have in Cabinet Office and other departments have an AI use policy. The training is all about how to use these tools as your assistant, not to replace you, and you need to check your outputs. There's those sorts of support in training terms and in guardrails that we're putting around the sort of day-to-day use of Copilot particularly. And the second one is linked to what I mentioned about the Power Apps Academy, which is, it's fantastic to begin to create extra capacity and, if you like, democratise some of the simple development of workflows and agents across government. But we've seen that in terms of sudden fragmentation of our IT tools. So we're trying to anticipate any risks of that, which is why we'll have GTS will remain sort of a technical design authority, and we're putting the guardrails around the standards of development of that. And that is work in progress at the moment.
So you have like a sort of a heat map, as it were, like a framework that you have in place for these things.
That is, I wouldn't use that term, but yes, it's that sort of guardrails of what's where, who maintains it once it's been developed, if it's being developed in all sorts of different places in the departments. Yes, so we want to have that central registry, if you like.
And just to add, alongside Cabinet Office, all departments have those policies, and GTS maintain a master of that, but it also talks not just about the user kind of guardrails of things like hallucination, owning it, checking it, but it also talks about things like data, public data, what they're not for, and making sure whatever we do when we use we have a set of corporate tools, Microsoft in particular, that is kept within a secure hosted environment just for us. So it's not just about how you use it, it's about what you can put in it as well. And we're still at the early stages of controlling that, and that's really important, so that we maintain trust in our data, where it is, who's got it, etc.
Yeah.
So there is nowhere at this point that we have AI tools taking decisions without a human. I think should we approach that point, then there's certainly an extra level of assurance and reassurance that we would want for ourselves and for the public when we get there, but we're not near that at the moment.
And the second question is just around the project progress grids on the 2 quarterly reports that you've had. So you've got the centralised contract register that's set as complete, and this one is the quarterly report from April to June 2025. And I'll let you find that. And in the latest one, the July to September 2025 that's been published online, it says that it's ongoing. So I just wondered which one it was, whether it was completed or whether it was ongoing.
Which project was it? I apologise.
That's the centralised contract register.
So the first draft was, and the register, the first phase of it has been completed in terms of the scope that the project had set itself. What changed was we then had a discussion about it and asked for wider scope to be applied. So a first phase was sufficient in order to create a register of contracts that then the 5-year procurement plan could be based on. And that was the phase of work that were the order of the work that was required. Sorry.
No, if I could just add that first phase, and I see the point.
Yeah.
Bringing together all of our tendered stuff, understanding what's contracted, where the dates are, and what it looks like. That was done early doors. What it did show is there is a significant amount of spend that happens that isn't through those big tenders, those contracts. Therefore, the second phase, which is reflected in the September one, is actually we made a commitment to bring all of our contract visibility into one place. And only last week at OPCB, a further piece of work was agreed to physically start reviewing everything over 100,000, no matter what the source is, whether it's tendered, whether it's an exemption, whether it's a collective of other individual purchases across different areas. So it's an ongoing project. The starting point in that first one was just the tendered stuff to make sure we had it in one place.
It might be worth making that perhaps a little bit clearer in future reports. And I'm not trying to nitpick, I promise. Yeah. It's just I was trying to sort of understand where everything's up to. It might also be worth potentially providing some degree of narrative, maybe, around some of the things that perhaps have changed or altered, or phases that may have completed.
Accepted. Thank you.
Moving on to capacity, and this is very much around sort of staffing. I think you've talked quite a bit about that already anyway, so I don't want to sort of tread on old ground really. But what I suppose hasn't been particularly clear has been around how much staffing and budget is. We know the budget's set at 5 million, but how much is being allocated to this project? How much resource is allocated to this project? And are we sticking with the budget that we've agreed to, or that we've been public about, or is it where is that sitting at the moment? So I suppose as at now.
Sorry, you're asking for, just to be clear, staff costs related to the project specifically, yeah?
Yes.
So the total budget in terms of the business cases that's been reported is the 3.9 million or so, over which stretches in effect over 3 financial years.
Yeah.
And we are so far spent just over 1 million.
Right.
So we don't treat that money once approved as required to be spent. We're spending it as prudently as we can in delivery of the objectives. In terms of what that translates to in terms of team, additional team members, we have, I'm just making sure I give you exactly the right information, it's recruited 15.5 LTAs into the centre, and we're very clear that we needed to increase the headcount in the Central Change Programme, but that was always going to be on a limited term basis to not that flexibility to scale back down again as and when necessary. And of course there are existing Cabinet Office resources as well that have been pivoted to that programme. So within GTS that runs the core programme, this varies because the project portfolio changes as things come in up, but about 13 core, it's not individuals, but that includes fractional time of people, I'd say about 13 to 15 headcount at any one time. I'm not then including in there colleagues of resources, the absolute critical people in departments who are working on this as well. But in terms of the core resources in Cabinet Office, it's those numbers.
Okay, thank you. And has a programme lead been appointed?
They have, and start on Monday.
Oh, excellent.
So we've appointed as, the title we've given is Strategic Change Director. So if you see that, that's what we mean when you say programme lead. And we've appointed James Males, who will be joining us from Nedbank. We're delighted he can join us again, like the others, on an LTA. To date, it gives me an opportunity to say thank you to the Executive Director of GTS, who's done both of these roles. As we mobilise the programme, he's tried to do, and it's part of the maturing of the programme that is indicated by bringing in a dedicated Strategic Change Director.
So alongside his previous experience at Nedbank, what kind of experience does he have?
I'm going to pass to Mark on that because he previously worked here before my time. So
yeah, so he came into government a number of years ago at the heart of GTS, set what was BCS up, Business Change Services. Then through the pandemic, he operated very much at the centre in terms of helping deliver lots of the digital transformations that were needed as part of that, and left 4 years ago.
Right, okay. And the project is to generate savings, as we know, that sit outside of Manx Care, DHSC and its SIP programme. But you do accept the need for additional savings and efficiencies in health and care.
Yeah, so DHSC is included, but not Manx Care. We have no sight on Manx Care's programmes at all.
Yeah, and they have their SIP programme. The SIP programme is established pretty well over the course of the last maybe 3 years or so. Other departments obviously don't have a SIP programme, and I'm not suggesting that Manx Care is a department, it isn't, it's a statutory board, but would you suggest that perhaps that's what's needed in each one of these departments? Offices and boards as well, I'm not going to leave them out.
I think just to add, we were keen at the outset, I think I said before, part of what we've been doing is bringing together the stuff that was already happening. So in the quarterly report, you'll obviously notice that Manx Care, we put a page at the back to reflect that they're outside the core programme, but they have their own, and the numbers are included in an appendix. Through the central teams, clearly we provide support and we work, whether it's digital, whether it's contracts, whether it's assets. So, you know, whilst they run their own direction and have their own SIP mandated at 2%, you know, we were keen to kind of reflect that and keep an eye on it. And I think going forward, you know, that dialogue will continue, will strengthen. We've got the innovation challenge for health as an example this year coming up, which I hope will bring some real, you know, more ideas to the table. But absolutely, should every department have a forward plan of what it thinks it needs to do, where do the ideas come from, what will they look like, and what will that add up? We didn't have the time to do this when we started last year. That is absolutely something we're working through at the moment. And again, Dr. Mathias can add.
Just to say that we mentioned that I'm meeting with each chief officer and some of their senior team members to talk about the priorities in the coming year. And the reality is, for each of us as chief officers, we're driving through cost improvement as well as things that would more precisely fit in the definition of efficiencies. And that change programme needs to capture all of that if it's going to be reflect what departments are actually doing and useful to them. So I think it will grow in that direction, but that's something that we haven't brought to OPCB as a formal decision at this point.
But one thing we are doing though, and again it's mopping up towards the end of the year, as the Chief said before, every department, excluding Manx Care, had £3 million of pay pressure, so the difference between the Treasury Award and the final settlements, and 5 million roughly of non-pay pressure, the difference between the 1% given and CPI. Understanding, and this programme is partly enabling that, but there are other things that have happened in departments to help meet those challenges. Surfacing that process has been underway through December and January as part of the scrutiny panels with Treasury, which will help inform on what does that list look like going forward, because next year clearly there are going to be pressures as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, Chief Minister, DHSC being part of this. Has DHSC been given some resource perhaps to assist?
Well, no, I think they've I think they, like everybody else, has been given the opportunity to, you know, give ideas where they could find added value, and that resource is, you know, our resource for fundamentally. I think Megan's just explained that staffing resource available, you know, and we will go in and help them. I mean, there's the prescriptions work, isn't there, that's been underway, but there hasn't been any additional resource given to any of the departments. I mean, fundamentally, you know, all the departments for multiple years, not just under this government, but under the last government, you know, we were running these sort of pay control mechanisms anyway, which fundamentally meant departments were demanded, you know, that they needed to make savings. So, you know, that cost improvement program or savings program should have been a fundamental part of ministers, departmental members, and chief officers and chief executive officers at the time, you know, their functions when planning the next year's rollout of services. And if it wasn't, then probably failings within, there would be failings within that department because they were not getting the budget they needed to meet all the pay awards that were coming through. So, and in terms of this, there hasn't been additional resource. This is really what you would call a more coordinated, effective way to deliver what should be BAU in an organisation the size of the government. And I think for us, it will bring to light, certainly more clearly, across all the departments, because we will be presenting the reports, where those efficiencies in terms of better service delivery and more effective service delivery and digitalisation have taken place. So in many ways, I think this is a more centralised way of doing it. Whether you then roll out more detailed level cost improvement programs to the department and try and get them to deliver that with foresight, if you're delivering a central one, technically, obviously the departments are playing their part in that, and there is of course a question of prioritisation. There's only limit to the amount of service capacity we've got. There's potentially, I think, 140 plus ideas that have come forward, more than that. But you've got to obviously try and prioritise those in terms of time availability. So there is quite a lot to think about in that, and actually delivering a more effective challenge around the cost improvement programme for government as a whole, and then trying to get that centralised and for a central presentation of where those cost improvements are going to be delivered over a 12-month period, I think would also be helpful, because in all this, when you're running 8 different departments, from a political perspective, there's always going to be different priorities around service delivery, and perhaps bringing those into a more centralised way so that you can get a better oversight of what you think are priorities to be delivered, I think is probably also useful. But take the point, and whether departments should report themselves on the efficiencies they're delivering is another question.
Yeah, I think it's just the reason why I asked the question is because obviously DHSC have got to provide a higher proportion of savings than the rest of government. So do you suggest that they have the right degree of support in place in order to be able to deliver?
So in terms of Manx Care and having Manx Care has changed teams.
They own the functions of Manx Care.
Rather than DHSC.
So Manx Care have access to some of their own change capabilities, very very much so, but they also interact with the centre in terms of some of the stuff in GTS, so some of the projects in that space, BCS in terms of project resource as well. One of the things, just by way of kind of a journey, and we set it out a number of months ago as part of the services stream, we see a future. Megan talked about power apps, but we see a future where part of the frustration across the whole organisation is ideas that inevitably there's finite resource at the centre to deliver change. One of the things we would like to do is to empower more individual businesses, individual divisions, so there can be change teams much more distributed through the organisation, absolutely based on business cases and based on delivering real change for good. That's tool sets, that's processes, that's change methodology. Yeah. That's very much part of our plan as well, is to deploy the tools, deploy the techniques, to also provide facilitation so individual departments can do their own reimagination and workshop and need less from the centre. The centre will provide the core platforms, the kind of the guardrails, as Megan talked about. But absolutely, where we're up to in the world of change, the world of technology, is increasingly that we can distribute some of this capability and we can have more. So historically we had a small team of, was it 4 developers? Yes. Hence we have a bottleneck over our ability to do change going forward. Not only are we increasing the resource at the centre, which is the right thing to do, not only are we deploying tools that will help them be far more productive, but actually taking that capability out across tens of people across the organisation, we see is going to provide a much bigger platform for change for the future, for years to come.
But just to be clear, I mean, just to sort of pick up, on your point, but also the sort of emphasis just come from the chairman. We have no sight on the running of that Manx Care savings programme. Yeah, that is something for them. We have no. The Operations Performance Control Board is not including that Manx Care cost improvement programme. It's not
Forgive me though, the Manx Care is obviously, the functions of Manx Care are owned by the Department of Health and Social Care through the Manx Care Act. So therefore it's the DHSC's responsibility to hold them to account on that SIP programme. Yeah. And then the DHSC then reports into this board. So surely there should be some sight, perhaps.
I think, I think the way we've set up Manx Care and the way that they're operating and functioning, it's a source of frustration because actually, let's be clear, I'm also part of this. We've got recruitment control frameworks in place. That's dampened down recruitment, but presenting staff numbers on a quarterly and annual basis. And seeing growth and seeing that growth predominantly in Manx Care often, not all the time, but often, is a source of considerable frustration. I mean, I can relay those frustrations back, but the board does not have, that's how they're spending their money. Of course, DHSC, but they predominantly have the Manx Care board, to be accountable for all this. And I know I was talking to the Minister about this morning on some of these issues and how she was holding Manx Care to account for, growth in staffing numbers versus decline in agency spend and all the rest of it. But I need to be clear with you, we are not dealing with Manx Care. That has always been a very separate issue for us.
Yeah, and perhaps if I can just sort of like hone down the question here, because I think what we've heard in previous evidence to this committee was that the transformation programme has all but ground to a halt due to staff being sent to the four corners, and it's ground to a halt effectively. But what we're hearing here is that firstly that transformation programme and the fact that has stopped isn't your problem, but over here what we've seen is there's 15 staff to deliver an efficiencies programme to save 1% of government's budget, whereas over there Manx Care is expected to save 6% of their budget with no additional support. I think that's the challenge I'm putting to you.
So I'll answer it a number of ways, but just to give reassurance, aside, the Chief Minister talked about Operation Performance and Change Board and what it looks like. The Chief Officer Group, every month we come together, which includes the HSC, and we look at all of our aspects of our financials, of our people, of our change programme, of our efficiencies programme, and that does include visibility of what's happening across the whole organisation. And I said before, there's no point in us talking about lots of other things if at the centre there's something that's holding Manx Care back that we need to unlock. So we do have some visibility on that. In terms of the transformation programme, that was set up not necessarily for things that Manx Care and Manx Care's board wanted to do, but things that were from the Sir Jonathan Michael kind of set of priorities, and it's been a programme for a number of years. That programme may well be winding down in certain parts. Separate to that, though, Manx Care has a number of change programmes that it monitors, it delivers on a regular basis. It is currently, it was targeted through the mandate for a 2% in terms of its SIP, about 7 million. It's currently forecasting, at the end of June was forecasting about £10.9 million, and is tracking up to about over 8 million in this current financial year. So we do talk about it, we keep an eye on it. As the Chief said, it is their programme, but it is different to the transformation programme, which was set up as a specific thing and was always going to be time bound as well to deliver a set number of things by way of broader change.
Thank you. Mrs. Corwood.
My first question actually was, is the £10 million per annum target cash savings, or does it include time saved by doing things more efficiently? Now, I can conclude from your answers so far that it's a bit of both.
Yes.
So, and
we adopted a fairly standard definition of efficiencies, and I think that was in the first quarterly report, but apologies if it's not, and I'm very happy to make sure it's circulated. So we do talk about the two types of efficiency saving: cash releasing and then non-cash releasing, which, greater productivity, enabling our staff to be more productive.
And Chief Minister, you were very keen to emphasise efficiencies in what you said to start with, and you did say that you're providing support to departments to run their services more efficiently. So what kind of support are you putting into departments to do that, and what's the cost of that?
So the costs that we referred to before, the just over 1 million spent at the moment, is for resources that have been brought into the central team. In large part, that is because you can get a critical mass of professional support of your technical expertise, your project managers and your business analysts and your change people. They work very closely with their client departments. So those resources I talk about are working on those projects with departments. We are also looking at ourselves and thinking about whether the way that we support change and transformation is right at the moment. So if it's not yet on the project list, it'll shortly be coming, because we're just scoping it now as a services project called Effective Change Delivery. And that is deliberately to take stock of not just the programme, but how we as Cabinet Office support departments and work with them. A good example of something that seems to be working at the moment is Desk have an embedded business analyst. And she therefore really begins to understand and build relationships in the department and can work to identify opportunities and not just always wait until the head of that service has spotted something and has crafted it clearly enough in their minds to be able to then come to us with a request. So, and actually that appetite for more support to work with departments to identify the opportunities has been coming out in the round of conversations with chief officers and teams that I just mentioned. So we're listening and we're looking at our own ways of supporting, and it may be that we change that and more of those change resources in the future are embedded properly within departments. So very much keen to see what will work as part of that, as part of our maturing the offer.
And the cost is balanced off against the savings. So, for example, you don't want to spend 10 million to save 10 million. So
they're all in those funded business cases. So the resources that I talked about are against those business cases. We'll only be able to tell you, of course, once we realise those savings, what the return on investment has been.
Okay. And do you have a methodology for quantifying efficiency savings?
So two aspects of that. First is that yes, a lot of it will be, as you say, time saved, and we will quantify that in the best possible way, taking into account the staff involved. Some of it will be on contract savings. That's somewhat easier at times, and then there will be a savings from if there is an asset sale or if there's a saving in other ways. So each of those is calculated. Important to, I think, the point about challenge before, we've got 2 members of the programme team sitting within the Efficiencies and Change programme who are responsible for this. So departments identify, and then they are working with this central team who challenge it and try to make sure that we are doing it consistently across the departments. So there have been a number of very detailed methodological points that have come up and that we've resolved as we've gone along. But it's that challenge process that Mark was describing previously. The potential identified savings are very rough. They're the top of the hopper, and we're really encouraging people to put things in there. Let's get those opportunities very roughly identified, throw them in, let's have a look at them. It gets that much more robust when we get to the point when I, as a chief officer with my finance business partner and my colleague chief officers, say that that's an agreed saving. And that typically that may have a business case underneath it, or I know how I'm going to deliver it within my existing resources. And then it'll only come through into the management accounts, and the finance business partners are agreeing that they can see that money coming through.
Okay. And will cost avoidance be counted towards the 10 million?
So it depends on your definition of cost avoidance. So I'm trying to think of a good example of this. So on the use of deployment of AI and the pilot that I did in Cabinet Office in the first quarter of this financial year, we are capturing that productivity saving of those individuals. We're not then suggesting that has stopped recruitment and capturing it again a second time. It's one example, but I'm very happy if you want to give me others to try to explain it further.
No, my thoughts were around holding vacancies.
So,
assuming that's a saving rather than...
So that cost avoidance, yes, we are. In the recruitment control framework, the impact of that has been to delay some recruitment. So that cost avoidance we have been capturing.
And we have a formal document that reflects UK practice, also reflects statements made in terms of the financial reporting, annual statements, which defines, in terms of the 10 million we're tracking, primarily our goal is on cash releasing on a recurring basis. But it does define efficiencies, defines cash, non-cash, it talks about cost avoidance, it talks about also increased income, not about putting charges up, but if we are already entitled to it, it's due us, but we're not particularly good at collecting it. If there's a better in collection, then that can count. But the 10 million principally is around, is where we're going for cash.
Well, it is income, but it's not increasing income.
Correct, it's not charging the public more, it's capturing what is entitled, whether it's debt collection or in some way, shape or form.
Okay, but releasing assets would be part of the savings?
Yes.
No,
you go for it.
It is, and releasing assets is a good example of two sides. There's an initial thing, but then there's the on costs, the stuff we have to maintain, we have to light it, we have to insure it, there's rates, there's often maintenance costs, so there's a one-off, but absolutely also we're having an eye on what does this look like over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, etc.
And we are keeping an eye on those in subcategories throughout the programme, recognising that people will see them differently.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, you said there's a methodology there, and I think the one that was mentioned in the document is the Greater Manchester CBA model. Can you just confirm that that is the model that you're using, and if there's areas there where you're diverging from that, would you perhaps be able to let us know in future?
That's the basis of it. As to whether there's any specific variations, I don't think so, but we can follow that up afterwards.
I would have to come back to you to be sure from that two-person team I mentioned.
Okay, thank you. We are just to close off then on savings before I hand over to Mr. Mercer. We're very nearly the end of the first year. We're sort of 60 odd days away from the first year of this. Are you going to make your 10 million target in year one?
No. Well, don't forget we started this really effectively in April 2025.
Yes.
I announced it in 2024. So in that 25 to 26 period, I think Chief Officer will say that we will have done £2.5 million by the end of March. So the end of this, by the end of March, I think there is up to £14 million of savings that have been identified, but the challenge will be realising those, Chief Officer.
So I think good stuff. We've made some good progress. We've had some real enthusiasm. We're getting stuff kind of into the bank now. We expect by the end of March, from what we currently see, but there are still some stuff coming through, that we'll be up to about £2.5 million of physical stuff that's been realised. That has a recurring value of over 10 million by the time, if you look forward. Out of the 14
over 5 years.
Over 5 years. Out of the 14.6, there's about 6 million currently that has been agreed, which involves the process that I said before through Treasury and Chief Officers being real and not just a notional idea. And that will have a recurring value of over 30 million if fully realised. And the piece of work I said before in terms of going through with Treasury, with the departments to look at what has happened this year, because we're seeing stuff that was created or flagged at the centre, but by all means it's not a reflection of everything. By the end of the year, we want to have a reflection on everything, because we said before the 3 million pay challenge, the 5 million non-pay, these have been dealt with in some way, shape or form. So as to whether we will hit 10 million realised by the end of the year, we still have that process to conclude, but what we are seeing is that there's some great traction for this for many months and many years to come as well.
Okay, Mr. Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. Just taking a look at a couple of specific projects now. The major one, I suppose, is the Digital Processing Centre. And so, is a central government digital processing centre possible without a single data protection registration for Isle of Man government?
I certainly hope so. I would stress it's still at a relatively early stage, this, and I know, you know, we mentioned this when we did a Tynwald members presentation last year and talked about across government there are a vast amount of processes, administration processes that occur time and time again, and to a good proportion, vast majority of the public, it's kind of less interested in terms of which department that sits in. What we have been doing, and historically, and we're accelerating that, is making those individual vertical processes better. But there is an argument that says if we lifted these out and did them in a different way, we could make it even further simpler. So recognising challenges of data protection, around kind of data reuse, etc. We have been talking to the Information Commissioner. Say, is it still at a concept stage? But in the concept of outsourcing, if we were saying we were commissioning to a third-party service provider to do some of these processes, there is a way through that. Whether there's going to need to be some legal changes, we don't know yet. But certainly consent plays a part. The power of AI clearly also plays a part, where it's less. A number of years ago, we would have been designing large data warehouses, trying to understand how we bring all this data together and store it, which clearly causes some challenges, complexity and concerns. Today's world is very much different to that in terms of a point in time, being able to respond, to reuse, and particularly we put the information back in the hands of the public, the customer, and then it makes it much simpler for them. So we certainly hope so, but I would stress it's a project that's at an early stage. We I've just put an internal project manager on it. We are bringing a bit more resource, and there's quite a bit more academic and theoretical and technical work to do on that.
So from that, I'm hearing that clearly there's some legislative change there. So what legislation are you expecting to need in place for this?
I don't think we know yet, to be perfectly honest, but so in today's world of online services, when the public, a customer enrolls, that information still sits in the individual departments. It's not held at the centre. Moving towards where, say, the customer can consent for that to be reused, to kind of tell us once, that's been talked about for a long time. We need to carry on working through that, but answering that legislative question is one of the key strands of that work stream.
I mean, just looking at the suggested completion date for this, on our paper here, it says the 30th of September 2026. Is that a realistic target?
We would certainly like to have the thinking done, and we have a pilot service in that space, all being well. I accept if we hit some legislative barriers, then there's a real challenge to that.
I mean, that sort of does beg the question. It is a phased project, so which delivery phase is this at? Where are we up to? And what's that date referring to?
It's still at the design and pilot stage, and that's about having a pilot, having the concept sorted, having it understood, and having a candidate service in that space.
Okie dokie. Thank you. So just to take another smaller example, perhaps, is take a look at prescription prepayment. So in the past, people completed a basic form and returned with a cheque. Now the payment can be taken online, and a certificate can be selected for the recipient. Can you use that example and walk through for us how and where the savings will come from that process?
So just trying to pull up the information on it. The process prior to that was for the service user to complete a form, to physically send it in by post. A member of staff would then phone that person back and then do data entry. In that process, there are obviously a number of different savings. I haven't got the business case in front of me to be able to pull out precisely what they committed to in it, but I'd be very that we can see where they lie, exactly how they're realising it. I would need to send to you afterwards if that's all right.
I think that would be really useful to understand, what value has been driven out of that process, how much more efficient that process is.
And I think that's a great example. I said
And what are the
before,
savings?
I said before that we have not yet fully reconciled everything that's been happening. If I look on the benefits list at the moment, that's not in there with any value. So, but we know when it went live in August, and since then we've had 1,200 users off the service, customers, with only 176 fallen back to paper. So 86% of people have gone straight to online, and even those that haven't, it's because they're already on or the vast majority are already on existing prepaid paper certificates. So, but we haven't yet gone through the cycle back to say, right, what has that realised? Because that project would have started before this formal process started. What we've done is helped focus it, make sure we get it over the line, report on it, celebrate it. And I think I said before, part of what this is doing as well is for our own colleagues in the organisation as well as the general public, just shining a light on what is happening more generally, but it's currently on a zero value on benefits.
Okay. Earlier I mentioned about automating a poor process. Is this an example where we may have done that? Because is there no way this system, I believe, does not check whether a recipient already holds an exception? It relies on someone ticking a box to say they do or they don't.
I absolutely agree. The project was started, say, some time ago, and maybe the digital processing centre is a place to do that. The idea that if somebody already has told us something and is already eligible for something, then other things happen as a result of that, is very much what feels like a modern society and a modern public service should look and feel like. There is a natural kind of journey here where we are doing things individually that are already in track, not slowing them down, deliver them, but then come back and look at broader. You've got the social security digitisation in parallel that's had some significant progress as well. At some point, can these things join up? It talks exactly to your point before about legality as well, but in principle, absolutely, we should be looking for that.
An additional point is that there's a second phase of this project, which is the introduction of direct debits into it, which again would be something we'd have wanted to have ideally done at the start. That functionality is now available, and the team are talking to various services about scheduling in the integration of direct debit functionality across them.
That's great. Okay. Obviously, there's an element of trust in all of these systems. So, whereabouts is the audit check? The trust but verify part. Where does the verify part sit in this digitised process?
In this one specifically, I honestly can't answer you and would need to come back to you on that.
We can have a look, but it'll be the same as what it was in the old process in terms of a process to understand if somebody ticked the form or if somebody does it online. But I do accept the challenge. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So just in terms of that bad process, automating a bad process. I mean, the last time I had to renew my prescription prepayment certificate, I filled in the form online, then I had to phone up, give my card details over the phone. They were then processed. Someone's going to then post me a piece of paper with a receipt for my payment, and that comes in the post. That's one process. Surely the better process is that when you turn up to collect your prescription, there is something that checks that Lewin Watterson has a prepayment certificate, and that cross-references with a database held by Mancare or DHSC. Surely that's a better process than creating a paper-generating and a postal system. Do you see my point about automating bad processes? What we've fallen into the trap of doing here, rather than improving the process.
So you earlier asked us about risk, which I also translated into that sense of ambition and confidence, and that one of the reasons we are growing the service design capability and the OD capability within the centre is to have those conversations with departments when they come to us saying they want this part of a process updated, to be able to have that bigger conversation to help them through that redesign process, because ultimately the departments still own their services. We can support them to reach a better design in one step rather than multiple, which I think is an example of what's happening at the moment.
Just going to turn now to another project, just on debt collection. And the question really is, how can improving debt collection be categorised as a saving?
So Mark spoke to this just now. What we have included is where you are improving the process to collect something that was already due. We're not changing the criteria in any way. We're getting better in the process. To the framing that Chief gave earlier on, we're not changing the what, we're changing the how. The how is getting a lot better through an automated debt check. So in that way, there was missed income, missed debt collection that we weren't receiving before.
And kind of put some numbers in this. This has come up from Treasury. So as Megan said before, we respond to individual departments that are kind of making their own business cases, and we try and enrich those. But at any particular point in time, there may be as much as 60 million in terms of corporate debt outstanding, VAT, tax, etc. And at the same time, we're paying out contracts, tenders, awarding money out. So a manual process historically has only happened on a few occasions, and it's intelligence-led. Turning that around, even if we can only find 0.5% or 1% of trying to improve that before we pay it out, just check and seeing is there an opportunity to either cross-check, reconcile, or just make sure we're okay. There is a notional value in there, but it hasn't delivered yet. We've not realised it. We're not tracking it in that. But the concept is, before we pay out, check, and if that can be done automatically, then clearly that could be a value.
But isn't the real challenge there not about sort of tinkering around the edges with the collection process, but there was a 3-phase project set out about 9 years ago by Treasury about debt collection, and we're not beyond phase 1 yet. Isn't that the bigger problem here?
I have to say I don't know the specifics of that. That's something we can go and have a look at. This is particularly around before we award a procurement value, checking whether there's any debts due. It's not improving debt collection more generally across multiple services. But I do recall that being mentioned or being part of a programme a long time ago. I'll have to go and have a look at where that's up to.
I mean, I can see how improved debt collection would improve cash flow, but I don't necessarily see a saving. I don't think I've really heard how this project delivers a saving.
Again, in the context of if there is a debt due before we pay money out, using that as an opportunity to have a conversation and collect that debt back is the idea. It's a £27,000 project, I think, so it's a relatively small thing that will just help. As to what it can realise, we will know in the fullness of time what, if anything, it's been able to do in that space, but the concept seems to add value.
Okay, thank you.
Just quickly, you're confident you've got the virus to be able to do that in terms of just netting off the value of a future contract against a previous debt?
I will bow to my colleagues in Treasury where this came from, but it's to flag it, not necessarily net it off. It's to flag it for an interception.
That's me.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering, in terms of this, you've touched briefly on pay and non-pay efficiencies. In terms of being able to shine a light on that, and we know that there is now the quarterly report that comes out so that there's far more visibility and consistency around that staff reporting. But what is being done about workforce planning to ensure that actually we have the right people in the right place and that we actually have that by design rather than just sort of pulling the brakes on and recruitment and just hope that they fall in the right places?
I'll point to 2 points. The people strategy has been agreed by the PSC and by Council of Ministers, giving us that framework, but it is necessarily high level going across the whole of government. Secondly, as part of Project Thrive, the improvements in the right sizing, if you like, of OHR that was approved in 2023, we have been increasing the number of HR business partners and upskilling them precisely to take on this task and support departments in it. So simply because having bodies in place isn't enough. We need to invest in our people as well. So the first phase of that is the workforce analysis phase, and we are aiming for each department to have at least completed that in the next year. Cabinet Office is trialling that, doing the first phase so that the team can do the learning on it and then can share that out. Each department will go at different phases and will take have different priorities within that, obviously. So DOI, for example, is already quite well advanced in looking at increasing the number and the range of apprenticeships, because for DOI there's a particularly acute challenge of the ageing population across all of those skill sets that they need, and including valuing the people we have who have decades of experience. So the workforce planning has started. That workforce analysis is the first phase. That's the short answer.
You mentioned that this all hangs off the people strategy. When can we expect the next update on the people strategy and its implementation?
We're integrating the actions against the people strategy into the reporting on the efficiencies and change programme. So we've mentioned the employee survey as a key step to formalise that listening process and make sure that we respond to what we hear in it. Two other things I'd point to is ongoing. This has been for the past couple of years already, ongoing emphasis on performance and development management cycles. Everyone deserves to know what's expected of them at work, so have your objectives set annually and pick regular one-to-one conversations with your manager, making sure that we've got that heartbeat of line management consistent across the organisations. And thirdly, we are progressing really well, we give credit, the lead section in OHR is progressing really well with refreshing our management training into management essentials. So we had a good offer before. It was aligned with the Institute of Leadership and Management, but they were long in-person programmes. The team has now developed an offer of a lot of more bite-size online training, and when you come in, it's for the types of training that you really need to be in person and really need the cohort experience through. So that refreshed management essentials is there, again, because we recognise that good management is key. So those are the three highlights I would give.
Okay, although I presume to recall the people strategy had a lot more other threads
There's
to
other
it, but
things in there
if
as
they're
well.
all going to be reported under the change and efficiencies thread without needing a separate update, then that's fine. I just want to make sure that it was capturing everything. One of the other things that's frequently complained about, and it was recently a matter of concern around errors in payroll, were about the myriad of employee terms and conditions. Is that an ongoing piece of work, and is that going to be reported on in this process as well?
Would you like me to take?
Yeah.
It's not part of the scope at the moment. We recognise it was identified in the Grant Thornton report that led to the Thrive programme. It isn't part of the people strategy at the moment. It is listed there, but it's not one of the year one actions. So that's...
There's obviously scope for reducing the number of errors in payroll by having fewer sets, because I think even just one class of employers doing the same job will have 4 or 5 different employee terms and conditions.
I'll shamelessly take the opportunity to say, and I'm hugely impressed by the job that the payroll team do as a result. Mm-hmm. I will also say that the team has spent quite a bit of time with support from GTS to improve the performance of our PIP system, our people management system, also exacerbated by the array of terms and conditions. So yes, it is a live issue. I'm just being very clear that it isn't one of the projects right now.
Okay. And are we looking at, as part of this, it's been more about the how than the what, I think, to paraphrase earlier. Is there much in the scope of what we're looking at here about services being outsourced?
It's not been a priority for us in the short term. This is about working with colleagues in the organisation, working across the things that have already come up by way of how we do things better. The Chief Minister touched on a project before called priority-based budgeting, with the concept of trying to map in one place all of our services. Mm-hmm. Phase 1 is completed and it's mapped over 150 kind of services and over 600 kind of sub-services. The next stage of that starts to look at what are the various different kind of options that might be applied to those, so that in the future, if there are financial challenges, which clearly we would expect, or if there is a broader conversation about what you might need to do, then there are the information, the relevant information is to hand. As part of that process, I imagine we will start looking at things like outsourcing. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, so the individual departments may well be looking at things at different times. We've not put that in the efficiencies programme, and we are experienced. You talked about the SAVE programme before, on a relatively small island with relatively small markets. There are some challenges when that arises in terms of either finding a mature market or making sure that value for money is demonstrated. So it's not always as easy in a small jurisdiction as it can be elsewhere, and we're alive to that.
The bottom line is, Chairman, if this project, the project-based budgeting is successful, you will have the services mapped out, and I think that will be a platform for choice. Should there be a requirement, from a political requirement, to change how the government was dealing with things, particularly the structural deficit.
I get that. I was just wondering how mature we are in terms of considering that as an option and the sort of issues that outsourcing will create. But if it's not an area of priority at the moment, then perhaps it might be a little bit early to sort of start working out how you're going to assess the viability and the key structural risks of going out to in a small market for certain contracts, if that's not where you're actually headed in this particular point in time. So I'll spare you that particular line of questioning. In terms of what is here, though, there is a real emphasis, a massive emphasis on digitisation of services in order to reduce cost. Now, increased digitisation means problems for the digitally excluded. And I was just wondering what is being done in this space to sort of counterbalance that. And I was just wondering if, for example, consideration has been given to using the network that's already out there in local communities, things like some post offices, for example, to present an opportunity to people to access services near to where they live. So two things one about access to services near where they live, and secondly about sort of generally upskilling or helping with those people who are just digitally excluded.
So, first of all, I think I should point out, those digitalisations, particularly the programmes we've talked about, have not stopped the manual side of that programme running. Mm-hmm. So, vehicle licensing, for example, you can still do that manually.
Until May, is it?
Well, yeah. But
and then you won't.
But the opportunity hasn't necessarily, there hasn't been a cliff edge stop. I think the education in terms of digitalisation programmes for assisting particularly those who are non-accessed.
Yeah, what does that look like in this plan?
So if I may, I'll speak to the point that was in my mind and then come back to that, which was because your point linked into the motion in December. That was November and then voted in December around community hubs is also relevant to this. And we have a piece of work that had, the thinking had of course started, but accelerated by the will of Tynwald to come to a clear position on community hubs around the island and a proposed model for that. I think that links to your point about physical access to services, or at least physical access to people to enable you to digitally access services, and we'll need to build on our digital inclusion efforts. But to be transparent, within the programme at the moment, there isn't a work stream that's on digital inclusion. It is part of what we're looking at in that piece of work around hubs.
Is it not a massive danger, though, that you're taking services out of being delivered at a community level when requiring people to do that by default in digitally, but we're not putting that support there for those people that need it?
If I can say, it's not a project in a sense of a single thing, but it does sit in each individual one. So you talked about drivers and vehicles as an example. That project specifically is looking at what happened. So historically, when people have done their vehicle tax, they get a code in the post, and we're getting about 50% of people go digitally. looking at the reasons why that isn't higher to the point where most people can do it, so that the vision of the future is where, and when you log in, you don't need to wait for a bit of paper. And you can do that now, you can see and you can anticipate. But what happens if it's expired as well? You can take the things away, but there will still be a need for, and there will always still be an ability to do it manually, even in that service. That's a conversation now about how we do that, where's the right place to do it, how do we make support there, links to conversations with the Welcome Centre, links to conversations with other, you talked about the third sector. We do recognise...
Post office network.
I think to be fair, I mean, you know, this programme was about assisting departments, enabling departments to deliver services more effectively and more efficiently to the public, right? So I don't think it's, you know, the question of how that service, if they digitalise, how they then are going to deal with those who are not digitally enabled, I think is a bigger political question.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's a question necessarily for, you know, the project managers who are dealing with this. They're being asked to do something that they're accepting its value to be had. I think for us, for all of us, then that is the bigger question. I think the Chief Operating Officer, I think, was correct to talk. Tynwald has raised this as an issue. I accept it is absolutely an issue. You know, we have talked about, you know, these hubs, as I said, you know, possibly being able to use the post office equally as a point or to continue to access services. I think it is an ongoing discussion of how you educate people. I mean, I know the third sector's also involved in this, and we have already talked about in Tynwald how you know, they can also enable and support people. Yeah. But we have got an issue because it's, you know, everybody is, if we want productivity from government, you know, with the staffing costs and everything that are coming, we have to accept that there is an absolute need to digitalise, you know, where we can, effectively and efficiently. We also have a responsibility, and that's a political responsibility, to try and ensure that we are educating and assisting and enabling those who have been digitally excluded, particularly look to the older generation, I think, in sort of targeting that, but also there are others, and I think that is a bigger question that engages both departments, I guess, in terms of deciding how that service is continued to be enabled from either a paper-based or manual service that they're offering, and a bigger question for us all about you know, enabling that effective access to services for those who are not so digitally educated. And I think it's a challenge. I don't think I've necessarily got an answer for you across department answer, because I think, you know, there's partly a responsibility on the service, those who are delivering the service, to answer that question, and a question for us all about how you educate people if they're not educated.
Yeah, I think that just sort of encapsulates the point, really. I mean, no one's suggesting that digitalisation isn't a good thing. I think we all accept that it's the future, and it's something that will help government promote its efficiencies. What I'm concerned at is the process that we've talked about for the last sort of, you know, hour and a half is very much about sort of efficiencies within government, and there doesn't seem to be much thought given to the actual end user who may not actually be able to access it the way that government would like it to be accessed. And that, to me, is the fundamental problem. That's still being left at service level, whereas we've got all this resource dedicated to digitalisation, but not an awful lot about how we actually deliver the service to those that may not be able to access it. We're going at a lightning pace on digitalisation. We're going at a snail's pace with regards to supporting the digitally excluded, because we're still at that we're thinking of it stage about hubs and things like that. So I just wanted to make that contrast, see if you accept that challenge, and see if you're willing to try and make the pace of both more equal.
I think, reassure you, we are alive, and we've had a number of conversations with private sector about different opportunities in the space, and I said right at the outset, one of the things the government, the public services we provide have to take account for a diverse range of our population. So we are alive to it.
Okay, but what are you doing about it?
Well, and there's things like we do have a digital inclusion strategy, but as a task, the best place, we think, for considering that is in the individual project to say, and it starts with the data. Until we know what's on the other side and what it might look like, it's hard to look at something in totality. as Dr. Mathias said, there is a piece of work though thinking about, let's look forward a little bit. What does this look like when it all comes together? And I think you have a commitment to report back on that.
We do.
It's all the sorts.
I'm not going to sort of keep pushing this particular point because I think that it's probably quite eloquently been put, but from both sides. But can I suggest that some of the decisions that have been made, when I was first elected to Legislative Council, I remember going into the Isle of Man Post Office, and I remember having the very first board meeting and sitting down and talking about both my card and also vehicle licensing at that point in time. And what was not fully understood, I think, across government and also in the post office, which was, a very, very corporate sort of way of thinking at the time, is that social aspect. And we've had the conversations in Tynwald Chamber very recently around my card and my card rollout. And then we've also had, sort of the vehicle licensing, and we know when that's sort of expected to digitalise in its entirety. So if we've been talking about it for this long, and it's been a conversation in Tynwald Court for this long, across two different administrations, is it time to pin down what that looks like before and alongside us moving forward with digitalising across the piece? When we know that that's where those efficiencies, savings, where all of those benefits come from.
Well, I think it is absolutely a valid question, and how do you provide facilities for people? So the My Card is the classic example, right? In the latest case, it's been taken away, and very few options. Check in the post basically is the answer. So there you go. I mean, is that it? So basically, is that an acceptable position? I mean, I guess it is probably one question that you would put out generally to, politically. I don't know that there's necessarily a single answer to this. A community hub is one. Putting staffing a community hub and dealing with those who feel digitally excluded and helping them deliver whatever the payments or vehicle licensing is possibly one answer. Absolutely, that is an answer. But perhaps also, across a range of multidisciplinary services and digitalisation and things, and how that service is currently delivered versus how it is then delivered online, and how you might counter that. Would you just carry on? It's practical just to carry on at a third of the cost to deliver it manually. Then maybe that is also another answer. So I agree. There probably does need some resolution on this, but setting up a hub, putting in staff, computering it, and then validating that is also quite a big issue. When you're trying also to make savings.
You already have a network out there that does that. They're called sub-post officers. You're already paying for that network and that system.
Personally, politically, I couldn't agree more with you, Mr. Speaker.
There's a first time for everything, Chief Minister.
Absolutely,
and let's make the most of it. So,
I agree with you.
In which case, look forward to a report in Tynwald in the very near future.
Can I actually disagree to a degree? Because
as long as you can phrase it as a question, then yes.
When you remove the viability of post offices, and we have to remember that these are individual, independent businesses that sit alongside the post office. Just in case we have people out there that are listening to this, and you're taking away my card, you're taking away the vehicle licensing. That obviously has quite a big impact on the post office's viability. So, if we were going to create community hubs out of the post offices like we were talking about in the last administration, do you think maybe we would have done it by now?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, I think, obviously that's a political decision, isn't it, ultimately? So, but fundamentally, the challenge that's been put, and I don't think it's necessarily an easy solution. Perhaps we are trying to simplify something that is actually, so how is that service offered? is it a person-to-person service? Do they come to a central office? How do you then change the way that you are looking to, or do you not change it, and do you just accept, the cost saving for the digitalisation, and accept that a third of that current cost will be kept because it's manual? But then again, in the case of the post office, that 1/3 may not be enough to sustain that person and sustain that sub post office. So I think there is a lot of thinking that probably needs to be done if you want to find resolution to this, and possibly some experimentation that would need to be done, as we take this forward. Indeed, actually, I met Mr. Chairman, a couple of your constituents in the lobby of government offices today who had come into Central Government Office to get a new vehicle driving licence. I did say they could go to their local post office and advise them of that. But anyway, yes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mathias, you would just add something?
The only thing that I would add is whatever proposals that are considered and suggested and put forward will need to be then discussed with the local communities themselves.
Indeed.
And fit with the great stuff that's already there. So it will never be one size fits all.
Couldn't agree with that more. Mrs. Cole.
Just a quick last one from me. You just said, we need to do a lot of thinking around how we approach things, and can you give us some assurance that actually in our hurry, and I'm not saying we shouldn't hurry, we should hurry to create efficiencies, that we really look at the surrounding implications of what we do. Take the My Card, for example. That's gone now, and we just discussed prescription charges. Now, wouldn't that be the ideal way to have your prepaid prescription on a My Card? That you just tap in and there you go. But what the point I'm trying to make is that we look around what we're doing to see what the unintended consequences are.
Accepted.
That's my point.
And on that bombshell, that concludes the public all evidence session this afternoon, and the committee will now